Hello friends, welcome back to my channel. Well, I've had lots of reaction to my review of Elton John's Leather Jackets album. I'm going to be dealing with some of that in a moment. But first I'm going to look at three B-sides that appeared alongside some of the tracks from Leather Jackets, but not actually on the original album. The first one we're going to look at is Highlander, which was a B-side of Heartache All Over the World. And you can find this on the Jewel Box collection. This is an instrumental, giving us a kind of futuristic soundscape, perhaps a synthesizer overload here, and it sounds a bit like an ELO creation. There are slow chord changes, and it gives the impression of looking at Earth from space, quite atmospheric actually. All the way through there, we're waiting for something to happen, and it never really does so much. It gets a little bit laborious. Reminds me a bit of the Carla Etude transformation on the Fox. There's a discordant burst towards the end, which is quite innovative, I find. Generally speaking, it's not unpleasant, but not outstanding. I would say it's slightly below average for Elton. I'm going to give this one 3 out of 10. Now, the B-side of Slow Rivers was a track called Billy and the Kids, which you can also find on the Jewel Box collection. This is a bit of a puzzling song, and it's not very clear to me what this is all about. You might have an idea. We've got lyrics like, it's hard for me to say goodbye to Billy and the kids. Maybe this is a broken relationship, possibly a domestic violence situation. Somebody's finding it hard to draw away from that situation. That may be what this is about. I'm not totally sure. The vocal from Elton is a little bit on the weak side here. There's a bit of brass on this, which is quite attractive. Elton is kind of sliding from one line to the other in this with this sort of sort of sound, which he used quite a lot at this period, and also on Ice on Fire, sort of rolling from one line to the next, although he did stop that after a while. There's some burrs on this, like Benny and the Jets, perhaps a little bit of an echo of the past there. But I can't really see a lot on this to make it either memorable or attractive. I'm going to say it's a disappointing track and give this one 2 out of 10. Now, the third one to look at is a track called Lord of the Flies, which was on the B-side of the Slow Rivers 12-inch. Now, I'm sure we're all familiar with that novel Lord of the Flies by William Golding, that tale of young people trapped on an island and what happens when you let young people rule the island themselves. Now, I find the whole lyric here a little bit impenetrable. It's one of Bernie's quite puzzling lyrics here. It's mine, I'm the Lord of the Flies. What's actually happened here? What's he saying in this song? The whole thing is quite strange. It starts off with some fly sounds and some laughter. Then it goes into a bit of banjo, some old-style traditional jazz, which is quite bizarre there. Is it about crashing on a desert island and only 2 people surviving? Something like that. The tune I find rather limp, and I just describe this as a confusing piece of nonsense. Now, I know there are a few out there who really love this song, so perhaps you can tell me what you particularly like about it. But I'm struggling a little bit on this. I'm going to say it's a below average song and give it 3 out of 10. Now, on to your comments. Now, this album seems to provoke more comments than most other albums for some reason, maybe because it divides opinion quite a lot. I've already said that this is a kind of a difficult period for Elton when this album came out. He wasn't in a good state, and I think this is reflected in the music. But as always, there are some decent tracks on the album. That's always the case with an Elton album. And usually the difference between one album and another is not necessarily the 3 or 4 standout tracks. It's the quality of the rest of the music. And that's where I think this one does fall down a bit. Anyway, here's just a flavour of what people are saying. Now, Mario says that he kind of agrees with me. Some songs irritate him. Leather Jackets and Angeline are sad, but I Love Paris has great harmonies in it. And Mario enjoys playing this on the piano. I would say that's one of the best tracks on the album. I think I rated that as 7. And it's a well-constructed song with a good atmospheric lyric from Bernie as well. Now, Dirk Diamond was a bit annoyed to see my overall ranking for this album coming in above Caribou. Well, I think Caribou, again, is one of those albums where, there's 2 or 3 excellent tracks on that, but the rest of the material doesn't quite come up to the standard. So that's maybe why that happened, I think. Now, another correspondent says that over 5 decades with any artist, there's bound to be a slump from time to time. But without these lows, no new heights can be reached. Well, that's a good idea, isn't it? That's good thinking, that we appreciate the better times by having these lower times as well. Now, Tony Young says that Go It Alone and Leather Jackets are the two best tracks on the album. Fair enough. I enjoyed Go It Alone, and I enjoyed being reminded of that track, which I've forgotten a little bit. Leather Jackets, I'm not convinced about that as an opening track or as a lead track on the album, but yeah, everybody's got different views on this. YS says every track was a massive disappointment. Well, I'm not sure every track. There are some good things on this album. Now, let's have a look at Oban says that Hoop of Fire was the working title for the Ice on Fire album. I didn't know that, actually. But of course, a lot of these songs were done during the Ice on Fire sessions, so there may have been the kind of that crossover in themes there. Doubleseven is a regular correspondent, and they go through every track and rate them. So let's just see what the standout tracks for them were. Well, Slow Rivers gets a 7.5. Although somebody messaged me and said they absolutely hate that track. Heartache All Over the World gets a 7. That's more than I gave it. And Very Sympathetic, 6.5 for Angeline, which I didn't really rate at all on that one. Paris getting only 5.5 from Doubleseven, who enjoyed I Fall Apart, which is a good song. But I made the comment on that perhaps the arrangement of it wasn't very good. And maybe something more stripped down, just Elton and the piano, would have been a better production of that song. Doubleseven does say Lord of the Flies, the best song from the bunch, a truly great song, fun, quirky, and a brilliant melody. 9 out of 10. Well, fair enough. We've all got different views on that, haven't we? Perhaps I need to hear it a few more times. I think I've heard it 2 or 3 times now. I might let that sink in a bit more and come back to it. Rutkowski makes the point that technically this wasn't the last album produced by Gus Dudgeon, who also produced the Live in Australia double album, which came out after this. So fair enough on that. And he says he redeemed his work with that live album. Elie Menzel likes Heartache All Over the World, saying it's kind of fun. But Paris is the best track on the album. And saying that I Fall Apart should never have seen the light of day. I'm not sure about that. Still think it's a pretty good song. I think the production just let it down on that one. Rob Davis says that he's in the minority who enjoy Leather Jackets. There's a lot of cheese here, but I love that. It's not the album to introduce people to Elton with, but it's a fun listen, especially in the car. Yeah, fair enough. Okay, I would still listen to this album, and I don't think I would skip over any tracks, actually. Angeline would come close, but I would still enjoy listening to this one. So good point there from Rob. Dee Davis says they like the album quite a bit. Heartache All Over the World is a great song to cruise around to on a nice evening. Yep. Although, of course, Elton referred to that song as the worst one he'd ever recorded, but I think he's going a bit over the top there in a sense because it's quite an enjoyable song, I think. Orban says the only 4 tracks they can tolerate are Angeline, Gypsy Heart, Paris, and Heartache All Over the World. What about Go It Alone on that? I think that's still a pretty good song. Chris Booth says the album is better than it was rated when it was released. And it shouldn't be rated ahead of Caribou or Too Low for Zero. Well, there wasn't much in it on those, I don't think. And Jet says, no way is Leather Jacket better than Caribou. Well, of course, when I set out on these ratings, I don't look at the averages or what the average is going to be until right at the end. So I've no idea whether I'm going to rate one higher than another. So it's always a bit of a surprise when it comes out. Mark Harris says, he hadn't seen that photo for a long time. That's a photo on the back of the album, how terrible. So yeah, it's not a great picture, that. I wonder why they included that. There could have been something much better, much livelier, much more cheerful than that, I think. Now, Mahan says, I don't think this album deserves the amount of hate it gets. It's not perfect, but it's not bad either. They find this album a lot more enjoyable than Ice on Fire or Jump Up. I haven't done Ice on Fire yet, but I know that album quite well, and I do like Ice on Fire, so it's going to be interesting how that comes out track per track. And Daniel says that some of the songs are not very good. Don't Trust That Woman especially. That's quite a catchy tune, I think. The lyric is a bit outdated now, perhaps, and says Go It Alone is one of his worst songs ever. Well, each their own. I must admit, I do like Go It Alone because I also like Nobody Wins, and I think they're quite similar tracks. On the other hand, Daniel says two of his best songs in the 80s, Slow Rivers and Paris. Slow Rivers really splits the audience there. Very unusual song. Some like it, some really dislike that. And Daniel says Angeline is quite catchy. Well, fair enough. So that's just a roundup of some of the views that have come in about that album. You can add your comments below if you still want to talk about it. I'm moving on now to Honky Chateau. That's the next one I'm going to be looking at. I've been enjoying listening to those tracks again. If you've got views on that one, please put them below. Subscribe if you want to, and I'll see you next time. Don't forget, we're still standing.